given a whole new twist by a group of music video performers who have a hot style that is all their own.
Kennedy, you didn't like Eugene McCarthy?
Well,
I mean, where's the
I'm talking about, wait a minute, I'm talking about politically liking a person. I'm not talking about the family life of a person, or the social life of a person, or the personal life of a person. I'm talking about people as I saw them in public life.
Of all the brothers I knew, Bobby the least. We weren't friendly, and to be blunt about it, I never really liked him. I'm sure the feeling was mutual. This is a surprise. I mean, this is Massachusetts Oneil speaking publicly against a Massachusetts Kennedy?
Well, no, wait a minute. You're going to let me explain?
All right, I'll wait till I finish what you said.
All right.
To me, he was a self-important upstart and... Paul. P-O-L.
Well, you know, the interesting thing, back years ago, the congressman from the district named the delegates to the convention. And I represented the old Kennedy district. Curley, Kennedy, myself were the only three congressmen in the history of that district. And now young Joe Kennedy has taken it over. And I named the delegates, and I named Judge Artesani, and I named a senator from Cambridge, or Somerville rather, and a state senator from Mario Umana from East Boston, and myself as the four delegates. I got a telephone call from Jack Kennedy, who was a senator. He said, Tip, he said, I'd like to have Bobby go to the convention.
This is 56.
56.
Jack was making a run for Veep, and Kefauver beat him, but we don't know that
Well,
yet.
now, wait a minute. Jack said to me, in case lightning strikes, he said, I'd like to have Bobby with credentials on the floor. He's the smartest politician I ever met. Hey, Jack, I'm sorry. I've already named the delegates. Well, he said, my brother, Bobby, he said, lightning strikes. I'd like him on the floor with credentials. And so I withdrew myself and named Bobby Kennedy as a delegate. So happened that my house burned down the day I was leaving for the convention. Never did make the convention. But Bobby never said, gee, Tip, that was nice of you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. You know, I've never had my name on the ballot before. I've never been elected before. He never said, fine, anything. And which the father later said to me, and I said to old Joe, Joe, you know, I said, I gave the boy the seat in the convention. He's there because of my choice. And, you know, he never even said thank you. And he said to me, you know, the Kennedys expect things to be done for them. He said, everything's been done for them along the line. He said, they're kind of selfish in their nature.
I got to tell you the truth.
Well, I'm telling you the truth.
I know you are. That's what...
I admire your honesty here. I mean, that's probably why you're number 6 on the New York Times. I'll tell you this, you do not kiss babies here. It's...
Oh, I did a lot of that in my lifetime.
Well, obviously you don't have to anymore. And Joe, Bobby was ruthless. I mean, that was the rap on Bobby, and you're coming forward to say it was true. You liked Jack.
Oh, I thought he was one of the great people in the history of the world, as a matter of fact. He only served 1,000 days as President of the United States and hard to assess a record. But he was strong on Cuba with the boycott, probably made a mistake afterwards in not being friendly with Cuba while the rest of the world was. We may have treated them wrongly. His Berliner speech was one of the great speeches of all time. But not only that, because of his glamour and his charisma and his duende and his flair, he attracted more people around the world into public life, and he helped change the world.
He also liked the ladies.
Well, I'm not talking about him.
Now, wait a minute. I'm reading your book here.
Okay.
And he had more fancy young girls flying in from all over the country than anyone can count. He was single. We should make that point, as you...
Absolutely.
All right, all right. In recent years, there have been plenty of stories about Jack's fondness for women, both before and during the White House years, but I don't want to get into that. Why not? You got into everything else. Let's just say that he enjoyed Washington a great deal. He flourished in the Senate, but the House just wasn't his cup of tea. In all my years in public life, I've never seen a congressman get so much press while doing so little work. He was bored in the House.
That's right. And as a matter of fact, he didn't follow the establishment. I don't know, there's so much we put on the clipping floor. I remember the day that I went down to the House for the first time, and I drew 317 in the old Cannon building. His room was 318 across the street.
Across the hall.
Across the hall, pardon me, you're right. And I heard him talking there, and he came over and we sat down, and he said, you know, Tip, he said, McCormick was a great man. He said, John McCormick, he said, I'll never forget it. He said, he came to me one day and he asked me to vote, sign a petition for Curley. And he said, I refused to sign it. As a matter of fact, he said, I never paid much attention to the old man, but he said, I had a fight, and I'm running against Henry Cabot Lodge. And he said, Jake Javits came in to the Jewish area of Boston, and Jake Javits made a speech in which he said, Jack Kennedy, like his father, he says, is anti-Semitic. He said he filed a bill, he said, to cut an appropriation for Israel. He said, old John McCormick, he said, about 3 days later, my father was upset. I wasn't friendly with McCormick, even though I was 6 years in the house with him. My father called McCormick. McCormick was loved by the Jewish people. He represented that area. He went into the same area, and he saw the same people, and he said, let me tell you something. He said, we had a foreign aid bill on the floor. He said, the Republicans were going to scuttle it. They were going to cut all of the money out. And he said, I tried to get somebody to make an offer, an amendment. He said it would salvage about 80% of the cut, so we could use it as a substitute. He said, I couldn't find anybody, and finally he said, I found this young Jack Kennedy with the courage, and he said he offered the amendment because I asked him to offer the amendment. And he said, you know, he churned the whole area. He said, I'm sorry that I was mean to McCormick. What a beautiful man. You're new here in politics. He said, John McCormick is a beautiful, beautiful friend, and I hope, he said, and trust that you'll follow the leadership, something that I didn't do. I don't know, I got that on the book.
It did. It's in the book. That is in the book. That did not wind up in the cutting room. I'd like to see that cutting room floor if because $80 cash to the local sheriff says,
absolutely.
You deliver this, you deliver your county, there's more on when I come back.
There's no question.
They bought West Virginia.
Of course they bought West Virginia. That's common knowledge. There's no question about that.
Did Daley give them Chicago, too, Cook County?
Oh, well, that's a different story.
Well, what do you think? Give me your best guess.
Of course they did. There's no question about it. They waited until the votes downstate were counted.
And then they made up the difference.
Well, you know, that was the ethics of the time and the politics of the time. That's the way politics were done in those days in Illinois.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I honestly don't want to cause trouble, but may I ask you to speak?
Well, I've seen your show, Phil.
Well, all right.
I enjoyed it.
Now, wait a minute. Here is a man,
yes,
whose father threw money at people to ensure, and at campaigns to ensure the success of his son, the congressman, subsequently the senator, your district, then the Senate, and then the presidency. Here's a man who, by your own testimony, bought his victory in West Virginia. Here's a man that Daley manipulated and handed him Cook County, without which he would not have served as president. Here's a man who saw women, a woman at least, and probably women in the White House. Evelyn Lincoln signed him in.
The life of Jack Kennedy.
I know you're not, but here's my question.
Yeah,
Wait a minute. This is pretty much on the record,
all right,
Mr. Speaker.
Go ahead.
And now comes Tip Oneil in 1987 to say what a great man he was. Was he a great man?
He was absolutely a beautiful man. Jack knew of nothing about the campaigning. The candidate is out there doing the campaigning.
And the dirty work is done by
Let me say this to you. If you're going to be elected to public office, it's no different today than it was then. There's the candidate, the issues, the organization, and the money. The money is the mother's milk of politics. If you don't have the money, don't get into the fight. How is the money used? You know, at the famous Smith campaign, Jack made the great statement. He read a telegram from his father. He said, son, I'm willing to buy an election, but don't make me pay for a landslide. Of course money is used in a campaign.
And Rayburn used to reach in his drawer of his desk.
No question about that. Ethics of the time. Times have changed.
So I could go into Rayburn if I were running and I was in trouble.
Right. And you didn't have to be in trouble. I remember going to see Rayburn when I had opposition. Rayburn would say, I appreciate that you've been a good congressman. I understand you got opposition out there, want to give you help. He'd reach in the drawer and he'd give you $1,000. Now the ethics of no such a thing. I never saw anything in politics until 1962. A check, you always worked with cash in the first 30 years of my life. Somebody gave you a check, you looked at them as a suspect.
But it's supposed to be different now with the FSC.
The ethics. Let me say something. Joe Jones is running for Congress. He's a congressman running for re-election. I can't walk into the federal building. I can't walk into the Capitol. I can't walk into any building that's run by the federal government and say, Joe, I'm a businessman in your district. You're doing a great job. I want to help you get reelected. Here's $1,000. You can't even make a donation today on government property. So a Sam Braben or a Speaker of the House, that's gone by. It's against the law. If I give anywhere over $100, $99, it has to be recorded, and it cannot be in cash. It has to be a check.
And how do you feel about that?
Oh, I think it's fine. I have objections of things that are going out there. I don't like the idea with PACs. I think that if a congressman that has raised $1 million and somebody else that's raised $800,000, I think it's wrong. Not that there's anything guilty about it, but you don't run for public office if you see that your opposition has $800,000 or $1 million. And consequently, the congressman, he loses his local touch. He becomes a national congressman. He becomes more arrogant. And I don't think that he does the best job for the country. I think people ought to report, and I think there's too much money. I think we ought to have a limit.
And we should... You make this big thing about local politics. Was it Curly told you that? Who gave you that?
No, I guess my dad told me that.
Local politics.
All politics is local.
But see, when they get to Washington, they get this Henry Kissinger-itis, the world, and the Persian Gulf.
Listen, I make a mention of a fellow by the name of Jim Rowan, who was a court officer in the House. You could go up to Jim and you'd say, Jim, how's everything looking out there? What about the new group of congressmen that have come along? And he'd say, well, 4 of them aren't going to come back. Why do you say that 4 of them are not coming back? They speak on every issue that comes along. He says, you know, the chairman of the committee, the members of the committee have been here for years, so knowledgeable and so talented. They know when they write a bill why every comma is and everything stands for. They speak on every bill. If they're that smart talking among their peers who are much smarter, imagine how smart they are when they go back to the home district. These are usually...
Sitting behind Reagan at the joint session of Congress speeches, you know? You remember?
Listen, let me tell you something.
That's the one I was going to ask you
No, let me tell you something. It's about the 2nd or 3rd week in January, and I'm out in Cleveland, Ohio, and I'm watching the State of the Union, and I turned it on, and there's the president, and I said, who's sitting in my seat? And it's Jim Wright, and he's talking to the president. I said, throat and a tear in my eyes. And the first year in 35 years, I haven't been to the State of the Union message.
35?
35 years, yeah. I've seen them all. No, I interrupted.
Now, wait a minute.
Phil, I interrupted you. I'm sorry.
He's sitting next to George Bush, and Reagan is going on about America and the city on the hill, whatever he's talking. And he's talking about the new Reaganomics, the new Laffer curve, whatever, supply side. You lean over to Bush on national television behind the president. You say to Bush, it's in your book. Voodoo economics, George. You understand that, don't you? Bush says, quiet. You say, quiet? You got to be kidding. You don't actually believe this bull crap, do you? Only he doesn't say bull crap. The Speaker of the House is using a barnyard expletive on national television, talking while the president... That's not what the nuns taught you to do in grammar school.
Listen, I'm behind the president as Speaker for all those 10 years with the various vice presidents, Rockefeller, Ford, and Bush. And, you know, we're looking over their shoulder, and the teleprompter is out there, and the president is reading everything from the teleprompter. People think that he's reading from a speech, or people think he's ad-libbing. No way he's reading from a teleprompter. We also have the script in our hand, and people always say, don't look at the script. Just look as though you're closing your eyes and you're going to sleep. To keep yourself awake, George would say something to me. I would say something to George. The vice president said, my wife, she is so upset the letters that we're getting in about talking in a conversation to you. Do you remember what I said at such and such a time? I said, sure, you said. Who was the good-looking woman on the 4th row? Oh, he said, I never said that at all, but pulling his leg. But you do talk about things like that. It's only natural when you listen to as a matter of fact, that's a 26-minute speech that the president gives.
You know, there's so much in here. I don't know where to... I've known every president since Harry Truman, and there's no question in my mind that Ronald Reagan was the... You read this book? Ronald Reagan was the worst. He wasn't without leadership ability, but he lacked most of the management skills that a president needs. But let me give him his due. He would have made a hell of a king. Now, what is this? You voted for him. You voted for him in 1980, and you voted for him in 1984. What is this fair weather friends? Does not the president deserve your support as he tries to make his way during the final hour of his...
I'm with him. I want peace all the way, and I hope this tree is put together.
Well, let's talk about that for a second. You want peace. This man mined the harbors of Nicaragua without telling you or anybody else in Congress. He invaded Grenada without telling you or any other members of Congress. He built military runways in Central America without telling you or anybody else in Congress. He dropped bombs on a crowded city at night called Tripoli, where children and old men were sleeping without telling you. And you stood there and the most you did was pout.
Oh, that isn't true at all. Listen, the credibility of the president is just coming out now. There isn't anything in that book that's new, as far as I said. I've been talking out about the president since the day that he was elected. You know, you said he didn't. Well, let me give you an example about Grenada and what I think of it. We were having a meeting in my office that afternoon. Schultz, Weinberger, the whole group. Talking with the leadership of the House about what happened in Beirut the week before. We lost 241 Marines. And what should we do and things like that. Kirk O'Donnell, my administrative assistant, one of my administrative assistants, came in and he said, Jim Baker's down the hall. So I went down the hall and Jim said, the president would like to see you tonight at a secret rendezvous. I said, don't give me that cloak and dagger stuff. Where do you want me to meet him? And he said, well, actually, it's going to be in the personal quarters of the president. I said, fine. He said, we'd appreciate it if we could have Secret Service pick you up. No, I said, I'll take my own car. Fine, you'll go in through the State Department building so the press can't follow you. And we went up to the meeting. We get up to the meeting, and the meeting is, nobody's advising me. I'm not there as an advisor to the president. I'm being there informed by the president. Well, McLaren was the principal spokesman. The president is there, the vice president is there, Schultz is there, Weinberger is there, General Vesey is there, Bob Michael and myself and Jim Wright from the House, and the leaders of the Senate. And they tell us about the invasion of Grenada. And I don't approve of it at that particular time. And the president reads from a 3x5 card for a couple of minutes, and he then turned it over to McFarlane. And McFarlane questions Vesey, and he questions Schultz, and he questions everybody along the line. And finally, it came to a kind of a dialogue, and I said, you know, this is a Commonwealth nation. Mr. President, how does Mrs. Thatcher feel about it? They had forgotten to call Mrs. Thatcher. The decision was in there. There's no question in my mind. I say it in the book. Why did we go to Grenada? We went to Grenada for one reason. Not that we should have been in there. History will show that we shouldn't. My opinion, we went into Grenada for one purpose. The American people were mourning over the fact that we had lost 241 Marines, and what were we going to do? So you take them off the front page, you go in and you get a quick and an easy victory, of which 19 Americans were hurt. I think it's wrong.
19 Americans were killed.
Were killed. I could be explicit on each one of those things that you asked me about.
But did you say that when it happened?
Of course I said it when it happened. And I remember the conversation very well. I said to the president, you know, I don't agree with your policy whatsoever. I don't agree with your policy since the day that Haig came into my office and said we ought to be in Grenada and we ought to be in Nicaragua and we ought to be cleaning out these things. And he hadn't been 5 days Secretary of the State. And I said to the president, all this was formulated before you nominated him. He wasn't coming in with fresh views. Well, I have never been forgetting the people. I said, you're never going to be happy until we get into Nicaragua. I not only said that to him, but that particular night I said to him, listen, let me tell you something. Mr. President, I think you're wrong. But let me say this, I'm not going to criticize you. And the reason I'm not going to criticize you, I've talked to too many people who are in Vietnam. The fellows, we had millions over there, and they used to say, nothing bothers us most. We're over here, we don't know why we're here.
And they're fighting about it back in the Congress?
We're fighting a war that you can't shoot at the people unless they shot at you. You don't mine the harbors. You don't knock out the energy. You don't knock out the bridge from China. And we're being criticized at home. But we are American boys, and we're over here because we have sent here, and we resent the Congress talking about behind our back. And I said, I'm not going to put myself... In this day and age, everybody down there with a two-way radio, listen to what's going on. The Speaker of the House, I wasn't going to criticize the president. Did I think his policy was wrong? Right. Yes, I thought his policy was wrong.
So the way to shut the Speaker up is get 100 American soldiers at any foreign outpost
And once something happens with which you disagree, you better keep your mouth shut because it looks like you're going to make life more...
Listen, now listen, Mr. Donahue.
I'm listening.
Now listen. You know, old Sam Rabin said to me, you can get more things done in the back room, he says, by head to head. And he says, if you're able to accomplish it, he says, you feel a feeling in your heart. Never mind the headlines out there. He said, let somebody else seek the headlines. And when I had my piece to say, I said it to the President of the United States.
And I believe
And
you.
I have a record of speaking out against the Vietnam War and of speaking out against Beirut. When I asked the President to bring the troops home from Beirut, he said to me, if Oneil wants to run with his tail between his legs, I'm not. Within 4 days, he announced that he was going to bring so many home 130 days and then 30 days more and 30 days more. And I'll take anything, but I won't take criticism of my record that my voice wasn't always spoken out there as a leader of my party.
All right. All right. Just, Mr. Speaker, sir, I guarantee you I am
By
not...
the way, were you any relation to Dick? Anybody
Donahue?
ever tell you Dick Donahue used to be at the White House?
Must have been a wonderful guy. He worked which White House?
Oh, he was there with Kennedy. You don't know Dick Donahue?
I didn't.
He was one of the big names in the White House during the Kennedy administration.
But
anybody ever tell you look like me? It has to be just a hair. I wish I was good looking at you. Somebody said to me, Dick Donahue, your son. I said, you got to be kidding.
I'm flattered at whatever I think. Let me just get this in here.
Yes.
Because I promise you,
It is your show.
It is, but I'll tell you this. I do not want to appear to be a smart aleck with a man of your considerable reputation.
Nobody likes a smart aleck.
That's right,
Bill.
they don't.
Okay.
All right, now, 50 years in public service. Right. I am not yet messianic enough to presume to tell you what to do. But please let me ask this question before this break. Your record is, you've paid your dues. I would be proud to claim you as a relative. You 50 years, really, no scandal, married once. You know, as far as I know...
Love more each day, too.
Wait a minute. So, really, it's terrific. Now, here comes...
Hi, honey, I know you're watching.
Now, wait a minute. Ronald Reagan scared the hell out of this Congress. There was not a more popular president in the history of the universe. And when he did all these things, people like Danny Fussell were left to pout about the harbors. And Barry Goldwater fired off a letter to William King. The point I'm making is when this man got off Air Force One and all those high school bands and those American flags and this our daddy has arrived, has come to us, Congress became wimpy. And I'm just trying to ask you gently, sir, for the future of this republic, because it's going to happen again. Even the #1 man in the House was less than voluble on these unconstitutional military incursions that this Clint Eastwood foreign policy brought us, especially during the first term, and your voice, may I ask you gently, was not as loud as perhaps you would like it to be if you had it to do over again. Is that possible?
That is absolutely a misstatement. That is absolutely a misstatement. If there was any voice in America that was crying out against the President of the United States, it was Tip Oneil. Mostly in the first years of 81 and 82 when I was hammered by the Republicans and buffooned by the cartoonists and criticized by the newspapers and criticized by every talk show in America. I was one of the people, I guess I was the leader, standing there with my finger in the dike trying to hold the President's program. The President's program, in my opinion, and I have said it 1,000 times and I'll say it again, it set back America. It turned the yuppies of America to a hatred against those who had, against those who didn't have.
We hated the poor.
And that is what, we hated the poor, and that is not what America is about. In the old days, if you bought a farm and the barn burned down, your neighbors helped you. If you were sick and your mother was sick, you went in, some of the neighbors came in and helped the kids. Yes. That's what America was all about, and we were driving away from that, and I was doing my best to stop it.
Despite my strong opposition to the President's program, I decided to give it a chance to be voted on by the nation's elected representatives.
Absolutely. That's a Now, wait a minute. Now, wait a minute. You know,
you're the safest seat in the House. Nobody would beat you.
I'm not talking about a safe seat.
So you had this power.
I'm talking about a democracy and how a democracy functions. The principal power that the Speaker of the House is the setting of the schedule. If the speaker says he doesn't want it on the floor, it's almost impossible to get it on the floor. 53,000 letters a day I was getting from the American people. 8,000 from my own. This is a democracy. He won an election. Give his program an opportunity. And I did the democratic thing. In a democracy where the winner is, even though he doesn't control the House, you give him an opportunity. Sure, there were liberals in my house, ultra-liberals, who didn't want me to do that. But it was the right...
Four of them.
It was the democratic principle. In a democracy, you have to respond to the will of the American people, and the American people had just given them an overwhelming election, and that's why I put it on the floor.
This is Speaker Thomas P. Tip Oneil in Stamford, Connecticut, and we'll be back in just a moment.
Assessment of Judge Bork.
Well, with regards to Judge Bork, if I were a member of the Senate, which I'm not, but if I were, I wouldn't vote for him. I have a very, very strong feeling on that. I don't believe that any man should be nominated for that position who has been a liberal, a Democrat, a socialist, a moderate, a progressive, a communist, not a communist, a conservative, rather, pardon me, I want to correct that, a conservative, and who became a conservative activist along the way, and for a period of time, as brilliant he is, and he's a brilliant legal mind, there's no question about it, he has stated his positions for years against the court, as an activist for the conservative against the court. I would be opposed to a liberal who had the same credentials, with able and talented and brilliant, and who is an activist against the court. You can make an assessment and say this was that 5-4 vote and that 5-4 vote. We can change this. Now, let's see if we can get this matter to the Supreme Court with Bork on there, and you could change it. I just think it was wrong for the President of the United States to send Bork's name into consideration, and were I in the Senate, I would oppose him. How do I feel about it? In Washington last week, I was talking, they said they didn't think they had the votes for him. Over the weekend, they tell me that his presentation was pretty good. Good listening audience out there. Most of the American people, because of the technicalities of the law, didn't understand it, and they say it is extremely close. With the pressures from the liberal group opposing him, the ultra-liberal and the ultra-conservative being for him. So it's
somewhere in the middle is the answer to this thing.
It's going to be very close.
Yeah.
Out of all the administrations that you served under, which one did you enjoy the most?
Well, I suppose that's hard. I served under 8 different presidents. I was in the leadership for the last 20 years, and I wasn't in the leadership under Kennedy. I'd have to say Jimmy Carter. One of the reasons that Jimmy Carter, I have an extreme feeling of Jimmy Carter's ability. Without a doubt, he was the smartest man that I ever served with. He was just unusually brilliant.
This does not meet the approval of this Connecticut audience.
Well,
now, why
the interesting
is that?
thing about it, there are things that I criticize him for. He brought a bad staff with him. He took too many balls and too many pieces of legislation on the fire. But he was a victim of 2 things. He was the victim of the economy because of the energy going from $13 a barrel to 44. It set off a world recession. And the Iranian situation was terrible, and he didn't have the opportunity. He couldn't communicate with the American people in the same way that Reagan did. But for sheer brilliance, he knew everything about foreign affairs, the guided missile system, domestic affairs, the Panama Canal. He didn't have to run from any 3x5 cards. When we went to a briefing, he had more knowledge on each subject than any person in the room. He was just a brilliant man.
Did you tell Sam Donaldson to kiss your Irish ass?
Well, that's a very interesting story.
That's probably why it's in the book.
I don't think that's in the book.
Yes, it is. It's in the book.
Well, it was an interesting day. I was at the White House, and at that particular time, I agreed that we would send the Marines into Beirut. I agreed, and a bipartisan nation would send the Marines. Now, McFarlane then had been over there, and he had come back, and he said Israel's going to pull out its troops, Syria's going to pull out its troops. The Prime Minister of Lebanon is going to fire the cabinet. He's going to make a new cabinet of all types of people. We need the Americans over there for one thing. We're the freest and the greatest nation in the world. They're just going to be a token of the United States government. They're going to be there for show. They didn't tell me anything about them being in guarding the airport or anything of that. And so they thought all the parts of the puzzle were there to be able to bring freedom to that section of the world, and I agreed with it. When I came outside, Sam said to me, "You agreed to put Marines over there? What kind of a person are you?" And I said, "Hey, Sam, don't bother me." He said, "Tip Oneil, he's hauling Mike, sending our boys overseas." I turned around, I said, "Sam, kiss my Irish." We get down to my office, and my office got worried, but thank God they never used it. Well, but you did.
Well, you did too. It's in your book. And we'll be. I'm almost out of time. Tighten these up now. We got a lot of
Who do you
ground to
think
cover.
would be a good Democratic?
Who's your favorite among
Well, my candidate for president is Mike Dukakis. I think he's been a fantastic governor. The interesting thing about Mike is Massachusetts got the greatest economy in the world, right in the country right now. No question about it. He has put education, he's put labor, he's put management, industry, and government together. We're all working together. The only things that we have in New England is stability and talent, and he's put them together. And we can compete with Hong Kong, and we can compete with Japan, and we can compete with Taiwan, and we can compete with West Germany. And he has been a leader.
this memoir? There's some things in here will surprise you. Including the fact that Ronald Reagan said that after you have Grover Cleveland's desk in your office.
That's right.
Grover Cleveland. Was he in the 1880s? I think he was.
Well, it was the desk says 1892 to 1896.
Oh, I mystified that.
Grover
case.
Cleveland.
All right, Grover Cleveland.
You know, he was president of the United States.
Now, wait a minute.
Well, I don't mean to.
Yeah, see?
I'm only kidding.
Oh, I don't cross
I'm
him.
only kidding.
Reagan says, he tells the president this before a State of the Union. He used your bathroom, didn't he? Doesn't he use the speaker's
No,
house?
after he got through with the
Now, I was going to tell a story because you're going to take 8
go
minutes.
ahead. I'm sorry.
All right.
Go
well,
ahead.
No, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I want you to tell, but
he was just inaugurated as the president of the United States, and he had given a speech, and he was to use the speaker's office to change his clothes and things like that, and I'm alone in the office. He walked in. My desk, it says, it's an old desk that Cleveland used when he was president of the United States. This is Grover Cleveland, 1892, 1896, and he looked at it, he said, "Grover Cleveland?" He said, "I played him in the movies." I said, No, you played Grover Cleveland Alexander, a baseball player.
And we'll be back in just a moment. Yes, ma'am.
I'd like to know what you think of Joe Biden's speeches.
Well, you know, I get a kick out of that. What was the Englishman's name? Kinnock? Kinnock. I met him. He's been in my office. That was a great speech he gave. I gave that speech 40 years ago. You know, I love to talk about the Oneils coming over from Ireland, being brought over by the New England Brick Company, working in the brickyard, tough menial work. They not wanting their sons, and my father being a bricklayer, and he not wanting his sons to be a bricklayer, honest task, hard work. And my brother Bill was the first of the Oneil clan that went to Holy Cross and Harvard and became a practicing a lawyer and a trial lawyer and a judge. The pride that we have in my brother Bill is the first of the clan ever to get a college education. We've been selling that for years. That's part and parcel of the Democratic Party. That's part and parcel of the making of America. He didn't steal any story. Kinnock is just telling, Kinnock rather, I guess, is just telling what everybody else. But I admire Joe because he did it to perfection. Probably he should have given it credit.
Would you please explain the origin of your nickname, Tip?
Well, Tip Oneil, in the 1870s, there was a tremendous wave of immigration from Ireland to America. And baseball was in its infancy, and they thought baseball was a game that came from the Irish, a game called rounders. And in professional baseball in 1888, followed by the name of Edward P. Oneil, had the highest batting average in the history of professional baseball. 473 he batted. But there's a quirk. That's the only year in the history of baseball that a base on balls counted as a base hit. And he was up there, and he'd foul ball it off and foul, and finally he'd get the 4 balls, and he'd get his base hit. The Irish so loved Oneil, he was a hero back at that time, that every Oneil family in America, whether you're in Omaha or whether you're in Butte, Montana, wherever the Irish is, there's an Oneil family. That's where the name came. It doesn't come from Tipperary. It doesn't come from T.P., Thomas Philip, or Thomas Patrick, anything. It comes from the old Tipper, the baseball player.
I'm glad you waited, caller. Go ahead.
Yes, I have to disagree with Mr. Oneil. As I remember his public statements, he nor the Democratic Party did not come up and give really strong opposition to the Republicans in the last 10 or 15 years, whether it was Watergate, the Patco workers, whatever. How are the American people going to know what the Republicans are doing is wrong if the Democrats do not speak out? And secondly, I also feel very disappointed in the Democratic Party for not giving more support to the self-determination of the Palestinians. The Palestinians turned to us before Israel was formed to look for help, and we stabbed them in the back, and now we have millions of Palestinians with their land stolen from them, suffering in the Middle East, just because Democratic politicians want to get Jewish money to get elected.
Well, that's a very interesting question. It's a long one. Jimmy Breslin wrote a book, The Day the Good Guys Won. It's about the impeachment proceedings. It's about Watergate, about the part that Tip O'Neill played in it, and there's no question I was leader in that. I can look back in my career and I can talk about the Vietnam War. I think I was the first establishment voice that spoke out against it. As the President of the United States, I have supported the President when I thought he was right and have been a voice against him all the way along the line. In a democracy, you know, he'd call me on the telephone and say, it's after 5 o'clock, and we'd tell a few stories and we can be friendly. In the course of the day, in a democracy, his philosophy is one way, mine is the opposite. I was the leader of the party, and I always spoke out. I always spoke out. Now you're talking about the Palestinians and you're talking about the Arabs. And I've had people from Egypt say to me, you know, America is pro-Israel. Why are they pro-Israel and they're not pro-Arab? Well, there's many reasons. Israel is a democracy in that part of the world, and it's a country that we're depending upon, but we want to be friendly with the Arabs. But the interesting thing about it all is, you know, I can remember a conversation, I forget, with one of the leaders of Egypt. And he said to me, you people are pro-Israel. Why? Well, I said, you know, Lenny Lampkin was my boyhood pal. He was the only Jewish kid in an Irish neighborhood. We were brought up together. Every time I've ever run for office, the Jewish people always help me financially, and they always come to my assistance. They're activists. They're my friends. I don't really know any Arabs, to be perfectly truthful. And, you know, the Jewish people by nature, they look back at their heritage, and they look back at the Holocaust and things like that, and they're interested. They're civically interested that it would never happen again. Regrettably, I suppose, the Arab people don't have anybody like that. There aren't as many of them. You don't get to know them. The issue of Palestine is a sad one for peace in that section of the world, and we always hope that, I had hoped that the Accords, the David Accords, which were one of the great things that Jimmy Carter did, would be put together and there would be peace in that section of the world. I don't know how many other things you asked me, dear.
And we'll be... Yes, ma'am.
Could you tell us what do you think caused the downfall of LBJ if it wasn't the Vietnam War?
Oh, it was the Vietnam War. As a matter of fact, when Jack Kennedy died, he had only been 1,000 days as president. He hadn't put any of his program through. But he wasn't worried about that because in the third and fourth year, the fourth year, he intended to put his program through. That was the program to remove poverty from America. Poverty was at a level of 26%, and he wanted to bring it as low as he could. And so under the administration of Johnson, we passed all that legislation that brought the poverty from 26% down to 10% in 1978. And so his record as president, if it hadn't been for the Vietnam War, and he was enamored with the people at the Pentagon and...
You meant 68.
68, pardon me, 68. In my opinion, had Kennedy lived, we never would have been in Vietnam. And I say that from a personal conversation with the president. But the downfall of Johnson was Vietnam. I mean, if it hadn't been for Vietnam, you would have been looking at him as in the same class in the mind as Franklin Roosevelt.
Are you there?
Helping the ordinary person.
Are you there, caller? Go ahead.
Yes, hello, Mr. Donahue. I would like to comment on two actions by President Reagan that you said should be condemned, namely the bombing of Tripoli and the invasion of Grenada.
Yeah.
I feel that these actions were vital to the security of American lives. And even though it's deplorable to kill, should their lives be more important than American lives?
Yeah. Does it bother you that he didn't tell Tip O'Neill?
No, it doesn't, because...
Does it bother you that he didn't tell anybody from either intelligence committee of either body?
Well, during times where American lives are in danger, the president has to act quickly.
So, in other words, he should be able to do that and not tell them for a long time.
Not for a long time, but in a time of war, he has to act quickly. And both those incidents were wartime situations.
Okay. Mr. Speaker, please let me get this in. You really do paint a very, very grim picture of the sitting President of the United States. You talk about a man who speaks by 3x5 cards. You tell us about a meeting in which he was reading the wrong 3x5 cards. You tell us about a meeting in which he stared into space and apparently said nothing. And then somebody mentioned Hollywood or something, or baseball, and then suddenly he becomes animated. Now, you have, and you are not alone in this picture, you have painted a picture of a man who's distant from the facts, who cannot speak extemporaneously on issues of import. We've got another year and a half with this man, almost. I'm serious about the question. Does it concern you that what happens? We have 20,000 people in the Persian Gulf right now.
Well, I think he's wrong with regards to the Persian Gulf, but talking about him himself, you know, a man doesn't become president of the United States by accident. He has to have talent, and he has ability, and he has to have leadership.
So that will surface, will it?
No, wait a minute. Let me just say this. I think he's probably the laziest president I've ever seen. I don't say that he's not talented. I say he doesn't do his homework. He doesn't do his briefing. I say the president of the United States is the most powerful person in the world, and with that power goes responsibility.
Right.
You don't say to somebody, you're going to make the decisions. Harry Truman made the decisions
Buck
himself.
Stops here.
The
Yeah.
buck stops
Yeah,
here.
but-
And that's one of the faults with the president of the United States.
Do you believe, then, that should there be an international crisis whereby this kind of decision that comes from the most powerful officer can be made with wisdom and prudence and in a
Does
conservative...
he have the ability? Does he have the talent? Yes, he has the ability. He has the talent. Has he used it as he should in various issues along the line? He's delegated too much power. How do you figure something happened like the Contras and the Iranian situation in the bottom of the White House? Because they didn't want to tell him. That's a terrible thing. That
You believe
like
he didn't
happened.
know about the diversion?
The diversion of funds.
Yeah. Did you believe he didn't know about that?
Well, I have to tell you, before I left office, he told me that he didn't know about it, and I have to believe him. I think he was truthful. Yes, I don't believe that he knew that.
And we'll be...
I know that he knew what was happening with regards to arms to Iran.
Right, but he didn't know about the diversion.
He didn't know about.
Do you feel it would have made a big difference at the polls if Gary Hart continued to run the presidential race after the affair?
Well, Gary Hart, I am the first elected Democratic delegate to the convention. The last day of office, they did that. Got a telephone call the next day, and Gary said, you know, he said, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to come over and see you. He came over and he saw me, and he said, I'm a candidate for president. He said, the old Mrs. O'Brien story, people like to be asked, I'm asking you for your vote. I said, you're the front runner. Front runners have a tendency to stumble. I said, you're not my cup of tea. You've been here for 14 years, and this is the first time that you've ever been in the Speaker's office. You know, you and I don't see eye to eye. I was a Muskie man. You helped in the destroying of Muskie. You helped to destroy the party in the Mondale. I don't believe in the politics that you brought in, and I can't be with you. I'm not going to say anything openly about you, but I said, if you're the nominee, I'll support you. But front runners stumble in our party, and I don't think you're going to be the nominee.
Over here, sir.
Yeah.
Mr. Speaker, don't you think that Gary Hart was treated unfairly by the media?
Well, Gary brought that on himself. I've been in public life 50 years. Nobody ever asked me to run for office.
Yeah. Is there a chance that Cuomo could be drafted?
No, there's not a chance of Cuomo. I love Cuomo. I think he's very able and talented. I think he's an outstanding man. Most of all, his philosophy is in tune with my own philosophy.
But he won't be drafted?
There are no such a thing, a draft.
You will
American
not have
politics.
a brokered convention.
No way.
They're going to have all it when they arrive.
Oh, it'll be brokered among the 7 that are there. Don't worry about it being brokered.
But there will be not a clear winner before.
But
Life and Political Memoirs of Speaker Oneil. And unlike a lot of books from big shots in Washington, this one is doing very well. You don't think Pat Schroeder can be president because she doesn't have enough money?
Well, Pat, no, that's one of the reasons. I love Pat. I think she's a beautiful person. Any person will take herself and the 2 boys and go to Cambodia and work in that refugee camp at the Thanksgiving time. She's just a beautiful individual.
Service is
Very
provided and
talented,
promotional
and everyone
fees
does a
paid by
great
the
job.
following.
He admires Pat Schroeder, but doesn't think she's got the money, and it's not realistic respect. This is his speculation. I know you
I don't
joined...
think she can...